Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. You're just joining us now. We're going to give it a few minutes, I think, for people to come into the chat. As you're joining, feel free to write where you're from, say hello to each other. That's always fine. We're here to talk about teaching research methods to prepare students for careers in behavioral science and data science. So a very exciting topic, and we've got Johanna Tomczak here from Gorilla to talk us through it. I'll hand over to her shortly, but yes, as you're entering, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, and I think we can get going with that. Thanks, Johanna.
Thank you, Danielle, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here today. We've got a topic I'm really passionate about, which is teaching research methods to prepare students for careers in behavioral science and data science with Gorilla. I used to be a teacher myself. I've taught in seminar groups and as a demonstrator, and I particularly enjoyed that experience. Now I'm working for Gorilla as a research specialist. Gorilla is a powerful and easy to use tools for experimental psychology and related disciplines, but I still am in touch with a lot of researchers who are also teachers and who also want to teach their students about research methods. So this is how I am involved in that type of work. Now, to get a bit more information about your background, we've got a little poll which Danielle is going to launch, and which allows you just to give me a bit more information about whether you've done online research before, how familiar you are with Gorilla, whether you're completely new to it, or whether you've heard about it already. You can just fill that in on your side, and that will give me a better idea who my audience is today and what I can focus on specifically. So it looks like we have loads of people who have already done online research, which is really good to see. Gorilla is all about online research, and we do have a lot of people who have never heard about Gorilla, which is also interesting, and some have heard of it but not used it yet. Cool. In terms of teaching research methods, most of you in the room are teaching research methods or a related class at the moment. And the biggest field of where people come from at the moment seems to be psychology, closely followed by linguistics, but there are quite a lot of other fields as well. If you want to let us know about those other fields, please do that in the chat. It's just a very good indicator for us where people come from and what kind of interests people bring to the webinar today. Okay, I'm going to get started now. Give you a quick introduction about myself. So, as I've said, I'm Johanna, I'm a research specialist here at Gorilla, and I did my PhD, completed it in 2022 at the University of Leeds. That was during the pandemic, and basically I had all those really cool plans about what my research would look like, but in the end, because the pandemic happened, it forced me to use online research, but it turned out really positive. First of all, it allowed me actually to finish on time. Many people spend extra time doing their PhD, writing up and going into their fourth or even fifth or sixth year. I was able to finish my PhD in just 3 years because I used online research and it was just a lot faster for me. I also hold an undergraduate in computer science, or part of it was computer science, so I know a bit about coding and how you could set up experiments online by using code, but I still find that Gorilla is much faster and easier for me to use, even with the kind of background I have. So these are the main reasons why I joined Gorilla, just to give you a little background about where I come from. And now we're going to have a look at what Gorilla is and where the research landscape looks like at the moment. So this is how we see the research landscape here at Gorilla. There are survey tools, which are easy, but not really powerful enough. And then there's coding in the lab, which is super powerful, but it's slow and really, really hard to do. Coding online might be even harder. So we believe that there is an easy way to create and run traditionally lab-based tasks online so that cognitive and behavioral scientists, and therefore also their students, can benefit from the increased speed, scale, and reach of online participant pools and make the world a better place based on evidence. And that's what we have created with Gorilla. It's both easy and powerful, and to a large extent, I think we've really succeeded with that mission. With Gorilla, we have made scientists' lives better. Here's a case study from Jade. Before Gorilla, it took about 8 weeks to build an adaptive stop signal delay task, which is a very complicated task to do, and then about 6 weeks to collect data face-to-face from 50 participants. That's about 14 weeks, or about 100 days. In contrast, once switching to Gorilla, Jade was already good at using Gorilla at this point, as she used it before. It took her 1 day to rebuild this task, and then 1 day to collect data from 50 participants. That could have even been more participants if she wanted to. So actually, it took just a few hours, and in a day, she could have collected data from thousands of participants. So the old way wasted 3 months for her, or a quarter of a year in just one study. And over a course of a PhD, where you usually do 4 to 5 studies, that's 1.25 years that could be saved and used for writing up, dissemination, holidays, or a better work-life balance. This is exactly my example, which I used at the beginning as well, where I found that data collection online was just much faster and easier to do. Now, just to give those of you who are new to Gorilla a little bit of an overview what Gorilla Experiment Builder actually is, we've got a little video here about core Gorilla functionality. So we support traditional reaction time tasks like the relational reasoning task. You can see at the moment, we can have any type of stimulus like videos, images, audio, text with any responses, key presses, or mouse clicks. Those are just 2 examples. The spreadsheet makes your life easier. There's no need to create a separate screen for all your trials. By adding components to your task, you can configure your screens without a single line of code. In the data, you will see the accuracy and reaction times, and we also have a survey tool, which does all the complicated things that experimental psychologists need, like matrix survey question types, as well as drop-downs, Likert scales, and sliders. You can preview your entire questionnaire or just concentrate on individual pages. And then, behind the scenes, you can add some scoring, as you can see here, and also branching. That would create subscales like a depression inventory. And then you link your tasks and questionnaires together in an experiment tree, which you can see here, where you can implement some randomization, counterbalancing, and we see some incredibly sophisticated experiments. I think the biggest tree we've seen had over 18 nodes in it. We also have advanced functionality like eye tracking, mouse tracking, audio stimuli, microphone recordings, webcam recordings, drawn tasks, and more. I'll show you a video of those components later. For now, I'd just like to highlight that I quite like this quote from Joseph Devlin from the University College London. Gorilla is a methodological game changer. He often told us that because you can do so many different things with Gorilla. Now, let's move on. With these new possibilities, researchers are collecting a lot of data, and we published this paper last year about what 1 million participants tell us about online research. Here at Gorilla, we see so many studies launched in just a year. And in this paper, we looked at all the studies launched just during 1 year. And that was around 1 million participants we observed. What did we find in that paper? So first of all, we looked at sample sizes across different studies, all fields mixed in. And what we found is that most participants are in medium, which means over 100, or large, over 500 samples. That means 25% of participants are in those large samples. Those are really samples which are not possible or not in that time frame to collect in the lab. So this is a huge advantage of the online research. In terms of study length, what we found is that the average study length is about 18 minutes. but you can do much longer studies online as well, and much shorter ones as well. It could be just a survey, or it could be a longitudinal study. It's really up to you. What we then looked at is, in terms of attrition, whether we see an attrition with longer studies, whether it makes sense to keep studies shorter. But actually, we didn't. The attrition rates were always quite the same across different lengths of studies. So that doesn't seem to be a problem. In terms of completion rates, what we found is that we had anything from 50% to 84% of completion rates, depending on the kind of recruitment you're choosing to use. For example, the social media recruitments, where participants are free and don't get rewarded for their participation, that might be the lowest completion rate because there's no real incentive for participants to take part. But if you're using an external recruitment service or an ID-based recruitment service, that is usually the highest completion rate you can aim for. You can read more about all of that in our paper. It will be dropped as a link in the chat where you can find all the other information if you're interested in this. Now, I want to speak quickly about the benefits of online research. I've touched upon that already, but just to give you a little overview, I think the first benefit really is speed. We have a lot of users who tell us that they switched to Gorilla and saved months and months of their time, which is obviously valuable, and they can use it for other research activities. In terms of scale, we are able to reach huge numbers of participants in just a very short time frame, which is another advantage. And then last, we've got the reach. We can, with online research, reach children, the elderly, clinical populations, and we don't have to make participants travel into the lab. Now, with these benefits, I want to start with a little case study to show you where Gorilla has been used in teaching research methods and in online research in general. So I've got this example from Fred Dick, who teaches at the University of London at the moment. And Fred teaches students across the country who are taking part in those classes online. And before using Gorilla, it was difficult to get them involved in the research process, as evening classes online usually meant that there was only limited time for testing and for collaboration between students. With the existing experimental software, it was also difficult to recruit bigger and wider samples. So what Fred's idea was to make students design their own studies for better learning so that they could collaboratively work on projects together. He wanted to get students to work in teams, even at a distance, and to make data collection faster so that students could focus on the data analysis and interpretation of results, producing a report at the end of the term. And then his solution was to switch to Gorilla, which enabled his students to collaborate on experiment design, making the process faster and easier. The students' projects collected enough and high quality data because they could each take part in those studies across the class to be submitted also for publication. And students really became better experimenters. That is what the students actually told Fred as well. Now, in terms of what kind of methodology Fred used in that task, it was a two-way forced choice task for auditory processing. So the task was already created by Fred. Students only had to do some little edits, which is all possible in Gorilla, where you can just submit your task and add collaborators to that. And in that case, the students were the collaborators. So here you can see just how that task might have looked like. There was an audio to play and participants had to make a decision between whether that was a long or a short sound. The second feature Fred used in Gorilla is randomization and counterbalancing. This is really easy to set up in the spreadsheet, where you can randomize different rows. You can specify which kind of randomization you want, whether it's blocks or trials or anything else. We do have quite a lot of settings you can use there. In terms of collaborating, because that was a big point for Fred, and version control, students were able to work on projects together because they could just be added to the project together, and only one person would make changes at the time, but students could review each other's work and then also continue editing once the first person had submitted their version. In terms of recruitment, the students used the simple link policy, which I touched upon briefly in terms of the recruitment that can be used with Gorilla. This is just to put a link on social media. It's usually quite handy for students because they can send it around by email or put it on a poster or social media, and participants can just freely take part in the study. This is how the data was collected in this class. So Fred's example is a really good one, looking at an online class to teach students about principles of research methodology in psychology. Now I've got a different example, which is Vivian Rogers, who works at Swansea University, and Vivian teaches linguistics, undergraduate students again, who always found it very difficult to understand complicated software, and Vivian always ended up helping her students more than she would have liked to. So there was a huge burden on her to actually create the experiments to be able to show students what research in her field looks like. And because ethics and recruitment of participants take so much time with lab testing, she was only able to make final year students do or take part in the research project. But then Vivian's PhD student at that time used Gorilla, and she found it very easy to use that she wanted to try it for her students as well. So Gorilla's teaching tools allowed her to scaffold students' learning experience. The students started by cloning and editing stimuli similarly to what Fred did, before being able to create tasks themselves. And that meant that she could get students from the second year to perform really at PhD level and be able to collect new and again publishable data. The solution was that the ethics application would just be submitted for the entire class. So there was no need to go through a very lengthy process, and students would be working in groups so they could collect the data together in groups while still each working on their own research question, because Vivian combined lots of different tasks in a given study, so each student had a focus in that project. In terms of how that looked like in Gorilla, again, Vivian used the teacher interface. These are our teaching tools, so specifically designed for teaching research methods with students. And in this teacher interface, what you can do is you can submit different tasks. For example, you can submit an experiment, a questionnaire, a behavioral reaction time task. And then that allows students to just have a look at that task, edit the task, and again, submit that back to the teacher. So this is what it looks like from the teacher's interface. From the student's interface, it would look like this. I've taken myself here as a possible student in that course, and I've just submitted the Stroop experiment so that my lecturer could now see the project I've been working on. And that allows the lecturer then to have a look at that experiment, check everything is working, and also use that for any grading or marking that is used during the class. What Vivian also used was our samples page. This is a page that Gorilla created with classic psychological tasks and questionnaires that are free for every user to use and to claim. So on this page, we've got quite a big range of different tasks in cognition across the behavioral sciences. So you can also find economic games, gamified tasks, and executive function, and also language and linguistics, which was particularly valuable for Vivian. And these samples can be cloned into any project, so they're ready working tasks, which you can just use as they are, or you can edit them and make changes to them. And then again, here's just another sample of what that could look like. We've got a clock task here, a flanker task, an IIT here, and then a relational reasoning task again. These are all just different tasks that are available on the samples page. In terms of collaborating, again, you can see collaborators can be easily added to the task and be able to make changes and to view the data. So in this way, students can work together on a project without overwriting their changes, but by really working closely on any given project. Okay, and then I've got a third case study here, which is a little bit different because this was more on the economics, and in economics really about consumer behavior. I talked to Gillian at King's Business School recently, and we had a fascinating conversation about how she managed to use Gorilla for her students. So she told me that students were less engaged with assignments like exams, and that companies often complained that students are less prepared for their future jobs as they've been learning a lot through textbooks, but didn't actually have any practice in what they were supposed to do in their future jobs. The idea for Gillian was to bridge the gap between theory and industry, innovating beyond the familiar and what is being done in the field. She wanted to teach students in the Influencing Consumer course applied marketing skills by developing realistic pedagogy and being able to make students test a hypothesis about which marketing strategy works the best. The solution for Gillian was to use Gorilla's shop builder tool where students can test different hypotheses using an online shopping environment about consumer behavior in a realistic online shopping app. And she created a competition for students to work in groups and find the most effective nudging strategy, which again for students was a very motivating experience because they were working on this real world problem and could actually apply their research to this problem. How that looked like in Gorilla? First of all, they had this social media task where students recreated a social media environment where participants would see different images and they could react to those images as if they were social posts. They then used Gorilla's shop builder where different products could be listed, and they used different nudging strategies to get participants to choose different options across the shop. They wanted to move away from self-reported behavior by using a simulated online shop like this one you can see at the moment. And with the customization that can be applied in the shop builder, they were able to add products, swaps, taxes, and messaging, and students could study a range of different marketing strategies. And this was really up to them to choose what kind of strategy they wanted to put in place. This was also a mixed methods research project, which means that we had some qualitative information and we had some quantitative tasks at the end, and it was done through a pre-test. So all participants took part in this pre-test at the beginning. They were then randomized to a different shop. So they had the control shop and they had the treatment shop where the different marketing strategies were applied. And then again, they had a post-test at the end to test whether the intervention actually made a difference in terms of results. And this is what students told us. They had a fantastic experience. The students gave a talk at our Be Online conference, which is a conference we organize once a year here at Gorilla, and they talked about how this applied classroom learning really was a hands-on experience that made them advance in their field and learn a lot better than just by looking at different textbooks. They said it was industry relevant and they acquired loads of transferable skills. And I'm going to talk a bit more about these transferable skills in just a moment. And then we are also going to have a look at which kind of careers can students actually aim for after having used Gorilla during their degree or master's or PhD. So let's have a look a bit more about what Gorilla is and what we do, just to give you a little bit more background, because I've talked about different tools we offer in Gorilla, but we haven't actually looked at the breadth of those tools and any details about them. So we've had a look at how teachers and students can use Gorilla. now we are going to see a bit more about the applied behavioral science that is possible with the tools. Our vision is to create a better world based on evidence and not opinion. And our mission here is the way we do that. So to create an all-in-one research platform for human data collection so that people have the data on what works. In a nutshell, we say that people go into Gorilla, those are the participants, and then we've got cognitive and behavioral data that comes out, which can be used in those classes teaching research methods. What is inside Gorilla? Gorilla is this all-in-one powerful and easy-to-use platform that allows researchers to create surveys. It has, at the moment, feature parity with something like Qualtrics. We've got a task building tool, which offers feature parity and more functionality compared to, for example, ePrime. And then you can link those elements, questionnaires and tasks together in an experiment flow. So you can go from surveys to tasks into, for example, a randomizer, which you can see here, which will randomize participants to different conditions, as we've seen with the shop builder example. On to further tasks, which can then be presented in counterbalance order. And then we have these advanced tools like the game builder, a multiplayer tool, a shop builder tool, and also UX, UI tools. So you can already see that this covers quite a lot of different research areas, which also means that it will be we can apply those skills to different jobs in the industry. Let's have a look at the core Gorilla functionality. We are going to just skip to the advanced features here. And in these advanced features, we are going to have a look at what Gorilla can do. You can use eye tracking, which is supported using the webcam, mouse tracking with the mouse, but also mouse view, which you can see here is a popular way of doing eye tracking without the eyes. Drawing tasks can capture creativity. Social media simulations are a useful way of studying misinformation, and navigation simulations like the ones here are possible by essentially linking photos together, and you can use the same techniques to do website simulations to test navigation and messaging. Then we've got our game builder tool, which is a way of creating more fun types of play reaction time tasks, particularly useful when working with kids. This is a multiplayer tool, so you can study behavior in a social context. It includes text and video chat, so your participants can see that it's not faked. And our shop builder tool which allows you to create your own shops where you can determine products, pricing, adverts, and more. This tool is particularly useful for consumer psychologists and epidemiologists. By comparison, this is what the experiment building tools landscape looks like these days. There are still people doing online surveys and feeling frustrated that they can easily run more complex paradigms. There are people coding their tasks in the lab and online and feeling frustrated that they are spending their time programming rather than focusing on the science they love. But both groups wonder if there is a better way. And I think by using Gorilla, there really is a better way, because Gorilla is very powerful and easy to use, which is reflected in the results we often see. And I'm going to show you those results in just a bit. Now, why people choose Gorilla is this winning combination of powerful, you can do without the technical headache. It's easy to use so that you can save time and focus on the science that you love, which is also able, the science is also able to be carried out by students, and it is supported so that you're never lost and never alone. Your students can get in touch with us as many times as they wish, because we do have a dedicated support team. Which brings me almost to the next point. First of all, here is again just a summary of what Gorilla can do. We've got the surveys, which can be created in Gorilla. We've got behavioral reaction time tasks. You can create gamified studies like the one you can see here, shops, or multiplayer experiments. And then really anything is possible if you wanted to use any code, which can be added to any of those components I've shown you before, to any of the tools. Everything is in the UI, so the coding is really only additional. If you want to use it, your students can manage this independently. There's no need to code or learn how to code anything in Gorilla. All the tasks that I've shown you, everything that Vivian, Fred, and Gillian have done, that was all without code. So it's completely possible for participants, for students just to work in the UI and not touch a single line of code. In terms of the support, which I already mentioned, we do have quite a lot of support available. We've got a very dedicated support team who are always there for you students, and that also then takes the burden of you having to answer any technical questions. We do have a huge support documentation where you can find literally everything Gorilla can do. Accessing our support desk, our onboarding webinar, and our office hours are completely free, so students don't have to pay anything for it, you don't have to pay anything for it, and we will be there to help you getting set up with your studies and being able to carry out your research. In terms of open science, we've got over 2,000 samples that students can clone, and you can also teach them about open research practices. This is very helpful if you want to make a project page for your class and want students to be able to clone that. You could create that page, which would then be available for other people to use as well. In the spirit of open science, we quite like to be able to share our methods with each other and make researchers, enable researchers to reuse any materials they've invested in. In terms of Gorilla in numbers, many of you will be quantitative people, so here is Gorilla just in numbers. We've launched in 2016, so we're only about 8 years old at the moment. We've tested about 3 million participants over 2,000 times. So that means we do have a lot of multi-session or longitudinal studies as well. Gorilla is used at over 1,000 universities at the moment. We do have 20 members in our team and 11 with a behavioral science qualification, which means that we are well equipped to give that support and help you in the process of getting set up with your research. There are over 2,000 open materials in our repository. These are materials created by other researchers and are shared for reuse, so you can just clone them and edit them, and that reduces your workload. And then we've got over 300 experiments that are launched each week. So I think you can see that's a lot of high quality science happening online with Gorilla at the moment. So that is Gorilla, just to give you that overview. It's everything you need to prepare for your and your students' future careers in behavioral sciences, whether that's in industry or in academia. But let me show you which roles exactly any Gorilla user would be able to target. And don't forget, really, the sky's the limit. We're seeing more and more roles like behavioral scientists that are opening every day. So do keep just an eye out for your students or for yourself if you're looking for a different role where you might be able to apply those applied research method skills. Let's have a look at possible careers. In academia, it's quite obvious what research skills like the ones taught in Fred's, Vivian's, and Gillian's classes can be used for. A lot of PhD students who have used Gorilla before, for example, continue using it during their postdoc or once they find a lectureship position. In industry, however, these fundamental research skills are used for a lot of different kind of jobs. At the moment, we've got Gorilla users that have the following job titles, which you can see on the slides here. One of the main ones I would like to concentrate on is the behavioral scientist role, which means that you're usually working for a behavioral consultancy company. That could be a bank or a consultancy, just a general consultancy company, doing research for their clients or research internally to improve any workflows and drive behavior change within that company. Similarly, that applies to research scientists and managers who look at doing research, for example, with Gorilla to study their processes and behavior change. Economists and consumer behaviorists often work with our shop builder tool, which we also had in one of the case studies, and to study the purchasing behavior, and again, often for their own clients. And then we've got UX researchers and product designers who might use Gorilla to study how users interact with a given website flow. So this is another potential area where we do have a lot of users at the moment who use Gorilla for exactly this aim, who are working in industry, not in academia, and who have those job titles. So those research skills are definitely looked for in these particular roles. Let's move on to this one. We had Daniel Richardson, who gave a testimonial about how Gorilla helps him to teach students critical thinking, a skill which is high in demand in the workplace. But there are really a lot of different skills students take away from working with Gorilla. For example, by building a task, they learn to solve problems and look and ask for help when they need it. Designing a full study, recruiting participants, and analyzing data requires thorough project management. We know it's hard to learn a new tool, but by doing that, students open up new possibilities and get better at learning themselves. As they often work in groups or pairs, collaboration is key, and a few features in Gorilla will teach them how to best collaborate, even at a distance, as we've seen in one of the case studies. And finally, designing experiments in Gorilla makes you become creative. What if I could actually use a different methodology instead? As you have seen for the case study by Gillian, where a lot of students were really encouraged to use new methodology and come up with new marketing strategies, we often observe that students find that a lot more fun and engaging to think about the experimental design. So these are skills that students gain by just working with Gorilla, and these are industry relevant skills. You can see that critical thinking, problem solving, project management, those are skills that are high in demand for any of the jobs I've shown you or the job titles I've talked about before. So it's really applied across the industry in behavioral sciences. So I would like to come to the next steps. If you have enjoyed the presentation about Gorilla and how this can be used to teach research methods today, feel free to sign up. Gorilla is completely free to sign up, so it doesn't cost you anything to try out things and just discover the environment and have a look around whether you might want to use that for any of your classes, whether it's useful. If you think it might be useful, then it might be good for you to sign up to our onboarding webinar. Again, this is completely free. You can just have a look around. And actually, we do have quite a lot of people who use Gorilla just on that free account, because you can create experiments and already show them to any collaborators. That is all. You can have a look around and play around with all our tools without having to make a purchase decision. And then if you're interested in learning more, or if you have a question about it, please do get in touch with us, because we love to chat to you about your research or teaching needs to find out more about that. And you can just chat to a research specialist or book a demo to learn more about what Gorilla is about. We will also be talking about our next grant scheme here. We'd love to stay in contact with you. We have 2 other events which are going on. We regularly run grants. One has just closed, but we have a new grant scheme which will be coming before the end of the year, which you can register for to be on the mailing list. And this grant is designed at a general research project, so you just need to submit a proposal when the time comes around for that grant, and we will then select some winners based on creative and outstanding proposals. But you can already be put on the mailing list so that you get the notification as soon as the grant scheme is out. In terms of webinars, if you've not had enough today, we do have a lot more webinars coming. There's one actually next week, which we are organizing about collaborative learning. So that might be interesting to a few of you here on the call today. As you're interested in teaching research methods in general, collaborative learning might be something you would want to learn more about, if that's the case, you can have a look here at our Gorilla Presents page where we advertise for those upcoming webinars. And then in terms of the grants, maybe just to say our next SAGE webinar is going to be about our grant schemes, and we will talk about previous research topics from our grant winners as well. So if there's anything you would like to know about that grant scheme, feel free to just sign up to our next webinar with SAGE. I'm sure you'll get the newsletter again, and you're then able to listen to that as well if you want to. Now, this was it for me. Here you've got just our contact details. You can find the contact details of our CEO here at Gorilla, Joe Evershed, and if you want to get in touch with me, you can also find my details here. I hope this was useful. I'm looking forward to questions that we can answer in the remaining time. And yeah, I am going to take a sip of water.
Great. Thank you so much, Johanna. That was really informative. I think we all got a lot out of that sort of fly through of what Gorilla can be used for in teaching context. We have a couple of questions from the Q&A. Laura asks, can Gorilla be used to capture audio files, so to gather verbal responses or language patterns based on a screen prompt?
Yes, definitely, Laura. It's possible to add an audio recording to your Gorilla tasks where you can record participants' voices, and that will allow you to save those files. Once you download your data, you will get the recorded audio files, and that is, I think, what the question was all about. So a big yes to that. Very easy to do.
Excellent. And then Shamala asks, how easy is it to import experiments from another software? So example for ePrime to Gorilla, is there sort of intercompatibility?
So at the moment, we don't have an integration which allows you to take over a task from ePrime to Gorilla, but we're working on, and this is actually available at the moment, we do have a Qualtrics importer tool. So if you have set up any surveys, any questionnaires on Qualtrics, and you want to move them over to Gorilla, feel free to try out our tools. We're still working on that at the moment, but that is something we can do at the moment. We're also working on some future tools to be able to, we had an old task builder in Gorilla, which we call Task Builder 1, and we now have a newer version, which is Task Builder 2. We're also working on creating an integration that allows us to pull tasks over from Task Builder 1 to Task Builder 2. So that will be available. And if there's a big demand for something like this, being able to use experiments created in ePrime and taking them to Gorilla, you can always submit that to our roadmap as well, which is our roadmap for development. So we frequently look at that to see what users are interested in, and if there's a big demand for that, we might be able to do that in the future as well.
Sounds good. We have a couple of questions from Mark, and he is mostly focused on how you can use Gorilla in a clinical research context, particularly in terms of medicine and surgery. I don't know if you have an example of someone using it for that, but I know that Gorilla is basically limited by your imagination to a large extent. So I don't know. I'll let you expand on that.
Definitely, I'm so excited about that question, because first I thought, no, actually, I have not seen an example about that. But then it just came to my mind that I have seen a study about that, and I was really fascinated by that study. So let me just give you a summary of that. In that study, I think it was designed for radiologists. And in that study, they were using CT scans, and participants had to detect, those participants were medical students. They had to look at those CT scans and identify whether there's something that was wrong with that CT scan. So whether there's a medical issue they could identify from that task. And Gorilla was used, so they recreated this whole CT scan environment, and that was also clickable, like it would probably be on a medical device. And participants were therefore tested in their knowledge about medicine and not surgery in this case, and radiology. But I think you can apply that to a lot of different topics. And I've also seen a different study about what was it? They were studying different risk factors of health. So all that is possible, and Gorilla was used in that case as a test for the medical students to be able to identify certain issues in human health. So I believe, as Danielle said, there are loads of opportunities to use Gorilla, and we've seen a few cases where this was done. And I think this is actually a perfect case where it can be used for teaching, because you could, as a lecturer or as the one teaching a class, design an experiment in Gorilla which you can use with your own students as participants, and they are able to test themselves with their knowledge and skills they've acquired during lectures.
Mhm. That's great. And so we had some people send in some comments ahead of the webinar, and one comment was that a simulation with dummy data would be excellent for giving practical insights. Now, I know that you have these resources, I believe. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about that and the types of how people can practically apply that in their teaching.
Definitely. So on our website, we do have actually a 1 or 2 curricula which are available for people to use. Those are specifically in psychology, but you could imagine also, if you have used Gorilla for your own teaching, you could make your curriculum or your slides available. And I know we've also had a user who created their own website about online research in general and did a lot of really cool videos on how they run their classes, basically. And that is another example. But on our website, you can find guides about how to get started with setting up Gorilla for teaching and how you would go about analyzing data, for example. We do have a lot of guides for students to make the data cleaning a lot easier, to data pre-processing, and done also the data analysis. So we do have an environment specifically for students where they can get help to any questions that they have at the moment, when you want to make sure that the burden doesn't lie on you as the lecturer in the class having to teach your students everything. We at Gorilla would take care of that, and students could submit their own questions. So we would look into that a bit more rather than you having to focus on that.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think everyone is so time poor these days that anything you can do to streamline that process and take a little bit of that burden off of teaching faculty is really great. I think we have time for a few more questions, so please do submit your questions in the Q&A. But I'll do a pre-submitted question now. So there was a question regarding the best ways to engage students in research while teaching. Now, I imagine as a non-teacher that involving them in the practical side of it is probably the best way to get going. But I know you've talked us through some examples, but maybe you have an anecdote or two you could share in terms of that.
Definitely. So we had students basically telling us, first of all, about our support team, because we've been helping students, and a few of them have actually mentioned members of the Gorilla team in their acknowledgement sections of their
Lovely.
dissertations, because they've said, what would I have done without you and without the help I've received from your team? So that's obviously always very nice to get that really positive feedback from students about how we were able to help them. But in terms of engagement, I would say students, we often get the feedback that students find Gorilla really fun to work with. And what we know in psychology, that there is this stats anxiety that might be across different fields as well, where people fear about having to analyze their data once they've collected it. Now, with Gorilla, we're trying to make that process as easy as possible, say, to create a really engaging task without students having to stress about, oh, but what am I going to do about the data? How am I going to analyze this? We do have loads of different guides that should help you get started with that. And then we usually have students coming back to us and saying how great their experience in this class was, because they could actually do something very applied, and they could also choose their own kind of research. They could almost become PhD students already by just creating their own research question and being able to investigate that. There's really no limits to what students can do in Gorilla.
Excellent. I don't know if we have any other questions. It seems that all the questions have been answered now. So, oh, here we go. Mabina asks, please touch more on data analysis if you have a use case for that.
A use case for data analysis. I mean, data analysis is probably involved in all students' projects. What we find in psychology and what I always found a bit strange is that lecturers usually focus on teaching how to use SPSS or how to use R in the better statistics courses, but we don't teach why we would use certain methods or why we would use this particular tool. So I think what is good about starting with Gorilla, starting to create a task in Gorilla, is that students get to think about the research question first, about their hypotheses, and then after that they think about how would I go about analyzing this data. So for me, data analysis is really, it should be planned in advance, but it should only be planned once you know what your research question is and what you want to actually measure in your task. So this is a case where I think starting in Gorilla, building a task, and then being able to look at the data coming out of that task gives you a better start into anything statistics related, because you really think about, okay, why do I need a certain statistical test? Okay, because I've got these two variables which I'm studying in my study. So by turning that around and not starting with, okay, this is a t-test, this is an ANOVA, this is a regression, and this is how we do it, without any context, Gorilla really gives you that context to your study. And by being able to create the experiment yourself, you've gotten more involved in creating that experiment. You know what it's about, and you're then better able to analyze the data. That's my opinion on that anyway, and what I found easy with Gorilla.
Excellent. Adewale asks, can Gorilla be used in GIS applications?
I'm not sure what that word is. GIS
Yeah,
application.
I might be, is it GIS? GIS. GIS, capitals. Sorry, Adewale, could you please expand on that? Let's give a second. I might be
Yes.
mispronouncing your name as well. I apologize. I am very bad at pronouncing people's names. So sorry.
The only thing I can think of at the moment would be large language models. If that's anything to do with that, then that is possible to integrate with Gorilla. You can use any ChatGPT-like product and make that interact with
Here
geographic
we go.
information system.
Yeah. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Is used in environmental health data collection. Okay, I'm not at all familiar with this field. I come from cognitive psychology, so this is completely new to me. Gorilla, usually what we say to external software or hardware that could be used with Gorilla is that if it can be connected as USB, then it should be possible to integrate it with Gorilla. That applies for eye tracking or neuroimaging, for example, fMRI hardware, that can be combined with a Gorilla task. I'm not sure about this specific area, as I don't come from that area, but if you think about what you've seen today about Gorilla, feel free to drop us a message about that and we can investigate further. I will ask some of my colleagues about that who might know.
Excellent. Thank you. Maybe an area to explore for Gorilla then.
Definitely.
Potentially.
I've never thought about geography, but maybe that's something that might be interesting.
Excellent. Great. I think I'm not sure if there's any more questions from the audience. We can give it another minute or so. Here we go. When it comes to price structure, does price include respondent recruitment?
So Gorilla price structure works as follows. You've got different tiers depending on how many people would like to get a subscription, or whether you're just one researcher and you want to pay per data set, which is what you pay in Gorilla. We are not a recruitment service, so any fees that would be required by any external recruitment service like Prolific, MTurk, Cloud Research, those would be separate to anything you pay in Gorilla. But you could also think about the recruitment we focused on today, which was the just having a simple link to your study where participants don't get rewarded for their participation. In that case, there would be no additional fees included in paying for that.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you for talking us through that pricing structure. I do remember
Oh, there's
actually.
actually another question about pricing now.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Do we offer a university-wide subscription? Yes, we do. Those are bespoke, so you can get in touch with us if that's something you're thinking about. We mainly offer department subscriptions, lab subscriptions, and researcher ones, but we also do a university-wide subscription. If that's something that'd be interesting, do feel free to get in touch with us and we can talk about that.
Excellent. The audience has livened up at the end here with questions. If you have any more, please keep them coming. We still have about 5 minutes left. I wouldn't want to end early if anyone still has a question or two. But in the meantime, you guys have been a great audience, very, very participative. So that's always good to experience. Thank you all. I think we can call it here if you're happy, Johanna. If you have any closing comments. Oh, hang on.
Just another question,
Yeah.
as you. Researcher option of Gorilla limited to receive data from only 200 participants. So those 200 data sets or 200 participants would be included in your subscription, but if you need more respondents, if you need more participants, you can buy what we call top-up packs for tokens, so for those data sets, and you can buy any amount really you want. So we've got researchers who have used thousands and thousands of tokens for participants. We've got some that have just used 50, for example. All of those options are fine. You can just buy an additional set of tokens if you need them.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think Claire also shared a link in the chat with how Gorilla supports launching sort of recruitment and things like that, the recruitment policies. So that's also a useful link for those interested in recruiting participants and how that integrates with Gorilla. So yeah, I think
No
if
more
no
questions.
one has a question,
This is your last chance.
yeah, 3 minutes left. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, rest of day. That would be great. If you guys come to the next webinar as well, you guys have been wonderful, an audience that's just been great to participate in the chat and everything. Everyone's been typing away wonderfully, so that's great. I hope you guys have had a nice session, and I think Johanna was very informative as well, walking us through what Gorilla can do and how you can use it in teaching methods and really getting your students invigorated for research. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you to the audience. You've been great. It's always really fun answering questions. So I appreciated that you had so many of those today.
Excellent. We hope to see you in the next one. Keep an eye on your emails, and then we'll see you then. Have a good day wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.